Imagine a man so strong he could tear a lion apart with his bare hands. A man whose very birth was announced by an angel and whose destiny was written by God. This man was Samson, the strongest man in the Bible, chosen to lead his people during one of their darkest times. But strength, even when divinely gifted, comes with its own challenges. What was Samson's greatest strength? And what was his ultimate downfall? This is the story of Samson, a man born to deliver Israel from the oppressive rule of the Philistines. His incredible feats of power and moments of weakness reveal a profound truth, that even the mightiest are vulnerable without faith and humility. As we journey through his life, we'll uncover not just the miracles and battles, but also the lessons about trust, betrayal, and redemption that still resonate today. Samson's story begins with a miraculous birth. A barren couple promised a son destined to change history. His life was set apart by a Nazirite vow, a special covenant with God that would grant him extraordinary strength. But his strength came with conditions. He was forbidden to cut his hair, drink alcohol, or touch anything unclean. These rules, given by God, symbolized the divine purpose for his life. Yet, as we'll see, Samson's choices often placed him at odds with that purpose. From slaying a lion with his bare hands to defeating armies single-handedly, Samson's acts of strength made him a hero among his people. But for all his physical might, his weakness for temptation became his undoing. His story isn't just about battles and triumphs. It's about the internal struggles we all face, the consequences of our choices, and the redeeming power of faith. Samson's journey is a roller coaster of breathtaking victories and heartbreaking defeats. It's a reminder that no one is perfect, yet God's plan for each of us remains steadfast. Through his victories and failures, Samson's life serves as a testament to God's ability to use even the most flawed individuals to fulfill his plans. Stay with us as we dive into the gripping tale of Samson, the strongest man in the Bible. Samson's story begins not with him, but with his parents, Manoah and his wife, living in a time of deep despair for the Israelites. The Philistines, a powerful and oppressive people, had dominated Israel for 40 years. Hope seemed distant, but God had not abandoned his people. In the small town of Zorah, in the tribe of Dan, Manoah's wife, barren and unable to have children, would receive a life-changing message. One day, an angel of the Lord appeared to her with astonishing news. "You are barren," the angel said, "but you will conceive and give birth to a son. This child, however, would not be like any other. He would be set apart from birth, dedicated to God's purpose as a Nazirite." The angel explained the Nazirite vow, a special covenant of consecration. Samson's life would be marked by strict rules. No alcohol, no contact with anything unclean, and most importantly, his hair must never be cut. His uncut hair would symbolize his divine strength and unique calling to begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. When Manoah heard of the angel's visit, he prayed earnestly to God, seeking guidance. "Lord," he asked, "teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born." God heard Manoah's plea and sent the angel again, this time appearing to both him and his wife. In awe, Manoah offered hospitality, but the angel refused food or drink, instructing them instead to offer a sacrifice to God. As the flames rose from the altar, the angel ascended in the fire, confirming the divine nature of the message. Manoah and his wife fell face down in worship, understanding they had been in the presence of God. True to the angel's words, the barren woman conceived and bore a son, naming him Samson. The name itself meant, like the sun, a reflection of the bright future God had destined for him. From his birth, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within him, preparing him for the incredible mission that lay ahead. Samson's miraculous birth wasn't just the start of his journey, it was a declaration of God's faithfulness. In a time when Israel seemed forgotten, God raised up a deliverer, reminding his people that he was still present, still powerful, and still working through even the most unlikely circumstances. As Samson grew, it became clear that he was no ordinary man. Blessed with unimaginable strength, he began to demonstrate the divine purpose for which he had been chosen. But Samson's journey was far from straightforward, marked by bold decisions, unexpected conflicts, and glimpses of both his strength and his flaws. One of the earliest displays of Samson's power came in a moment of sudden danger. While traveling to the Philistine town of Timnah, Samson encountered a lion on the road. The beast roared and charged, but instead of fleeing, Samson grabbed the lion and tore it apart with his bare hands. This extraordinary act was not fueled by ordinary human strength. The Bible tells us that the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, enabling him to accomplish the impossible. Yet, in a striking display of humility, Samson told no one of this incredible event, not even his parents. This encounter with the lion was more than a demonstration of strength. It foreshadowed Samson's lifelong battle with the Philistines. It also set the stage for another key moment in his story. On a later trip to Timnah, Samson passed the carcass of the lion he had killed. Inside, bees had built a hive, and the lion's remains were filled with honey. Samson scooped some of the honey and ate it, sharing it with his parents without telling them its source. This act, while seemingly innocent, subtly reflected his growing habit of bending the rules of his Nazirite vow. Touching a dead body was strictly forbidden. Samson's visit to Timnah wasn't just about passing through, it was driven by his desire to marry a Philistine woman. This decision troubled his parents, who questioned why he couldn't choose a wife from among their own people. But Samson was insistent, and unbeknownst to them, his choice was part of God's larger plan to confront the Philistines. Samson's marriage to the Philistine woman would spark a series of events that escalated his conflict with their oppressors. The wedding was anything but ordinary. During the 7-day celebration, Samson posed a riddle to the Philistines. Drawing from his encounter with the lion, he asked, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." The riddle was a clever play on his experience with the lion and the honey, and he wagered 30 sets of clothes that they couldn't solve it. The Philistines, frustrated and unable to guess the answer, resorted to desperate measures. They threatened Samson's bride, pressuring her to coax the answer out of him. Under immense stress, Samson's bride pleaded with him incessantly, accusing him of not loving her. Unable to withstand her persistence, Samson eventually revealed the answer. She, in turn, passed it on to the Philistines. When they triumphantly solved the riddle, Samson immediately realized their deceit. Furious and betrayed, he traveled to Ashkelon, where he struck down 30 Philistines to settle the wager. This act of vengeance was just the beginning of a cycle of retaliation that would define much of Samson's life. Adding to the turmoil, Samson's wife was given to another man, one of his companions, without his knowledge. When Samson discovered this, his rage knew no bounds. He devised a unique and devastating plan for revenge. Capturing 300 foxes, he tied their tails together in pairs, attaching a torch to each pair. He then released them into the Philistine fields, setting their crops ablaze. The fire destroyed not only the grain but also the vineyards and olive groves, striking a severe blow to the Philistines. This act of destruction led to further tragedy. The Philistines, enraged by the loss of their harvest, retaliated by killing Samson's wife and her father. Heartbroken and enraged, Samson launched another brutal attack, striking down many Philistines in retaliation. Afterward, he retreated to a cave in the rock of Etam, a solitary refuge where he could process the chaos and prepare for the battles ahead. Through these early events, Samson's complex character begins to take shape. His incredible strength and bold actions reflect his divine calling, but his impulsive decisions and emotional responses reveal his human vulnerabilities. Samson's story was not one of a flawless hero, it was the journey of a man chosen by God, wrestling with his mission and his own weaknesses. Even in these early episodes, one thing becomes clear: Samson was destined for conflict. His life was a constant push and pull between his divine purpose and his personal struggles. Yet, despite his flaws, God's hand was unmistakably upon him, using even his missteps to set the stage for the liberation of his people. The cycle of conflict between Samson and the Philistines escalated, cementing Samson's role as both a warrior and a leader in Israel. His unrelenting determination to confront their oppression made him a symbol of resistance, but it also highlighted the volatile nature of his strength and emotions. Following his act of vengeance with the burning foxes, Samson became a target of the Philistines. Seeking retribution, they gathered forces to confront him, but Samson refused to back down. He struck again, this time inflicting significant casualties on their troops. Realizing the danger he posed, the Philistines plotted to neutralize him. However, Samson had retreated to a stronghold in the cave of Etam, where he regrouped, biding his time. In response to the Philistine threat, the men of Judah, Samson's own people, faced a dilemma. Fearful of the repercussions of Samson's actions, 3,000 men from Judah approached him at his hiding place. They begged him to surrender, explaining that they were under Philistine rule and couldn't afford further retaliation. Samson, understanding their fear but unwilling to surrender to the Philistines, agreed to let them bind him and deliver him to their oppressors, provided they swore not to harm him themselves. Bound in new ropes, Samson was handed over to the Philistines. But as the Philistines shouted in triumph, something extraordinary happened. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson with overwhelming power, and he snapped the ropes as if they were charred threads. Seizing the jawbone of a donkey lying nearby, he unleashed a devastating attack, single-handedly killing 1,000 Philistine warriors. The battlefield became a stark reminder of the strength God had given him and the fear he instilled in Israel's enemies. Exhausted from the fight, Samson called out to God, expressing his thirst and desperation. In a moment of divine intervention, God split open a hollow place in Lehi, providing water to refresh him. This miracle not only restored Samson physically but also reaffirmed God's presence and provision in his life. From this point on, Samson became a judge over Israel, leading his people for 20 years during the Philistine oppression. Despite his victories, Samson's leadership was far from conventional. His strength and determination were unmatched, but his impulsive nature often led to unnecessary conflicts. However, through his actions he reminded Israel of God's power and his willingness to work through imperfect individuals to fulfill his plans. Samson's life as a leader was marked by moments of profound reliance on God and moments of reckless independence. His victories over the Philistines gave Israel a glimpse of freedom, but his personal struggles often mirrored the nation's spiritual condition. Like Samson, Israel had been chosen and set apart by God, yet they frequently strayed, allowing their weaknesses to overshadow their purpose. Even as a leader, Samson's interactions with the Philistines remained deeply personal. He didn't wage war in the conventional sense. Instead, his battles were often acts of retaliation or demonstrations of divine power. This unorthodox approach kept the Philistines on edge, never knowing when or how Samson would strike next. His unpredictable nature became his greatest asset and his greatest vulnerability. Through these years of leadership, Samson's story demonstrated the tension between divine calling and human imperfection. He was a man of incredible strength, yet his flaws were undeniable. His reliance on God in moments of need contrasted sharply with his impulsive decisions, highlighting the complexity of his character. Samson's life served as a reminder that God's plans often unfold in ways that defy human expectations. The legacy of Samson's leadership left an indelible mark on Israel's history. For 2 decades he served as a constant reminder of God's power and presence, even in the midst of their struggles. His victories against the Philistines gave Israel hope, showing that their enemies were not invincible. However, his story also served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of relying solely on human strength and neglecting the spiritual disciplines that sustain a relationship with God. Samson's journey as a leader was as turbulent as it was impactful. His strength inspired awe, his victories brought relief, and his flaws invited reflection. In many ways, Samson embodied the struggle of the human condition, wrestling with the tension between calling and temptation, purpose and pride. Yet, through it all, God's sovereignty remained evident, guiding and sustaining him for the task he was chosen to fulfill. Despite Samson's many victories, his story takes a darker turn as his weaknesses begin to overshadow his strengths. The man who could slay lions and armies with ease was, paradoxically, vulnerable to his own desires. His entanglement with temptation ultimately became the source of his undoing. Samson's downfall began in the Philistine city of Gaza, where he visited a prostitute. News of his presence quickly spread, and the Philistines devised a plan to ambush him. They surrounded the city gates, intending to capture him at dawn. But Samson, aware of the threat, rose in the middle of the night. In an extraordinary display of strength, he tore the city gates from their hinges, posts and all, and carried them on his shoulders to the top of a hill. This act was a bold statement, demonstrating his invincibility even when surrounded by enemies. Yet, Samson's actions in Gaza revealed a troubling pattern: his tendency to act impulsively, prioritizing immediate desires over his long-term mission. His strength was undeniable, but his choices often placed him in situations that threatened his divine calling. Nowhere was this more evident than in his relationship with Delilah. Delilah, a woman from the valley of Sorek, captivated Samson. She was not his first encounter with Philistine women, but her role in his life proved to be the most consequential. The Philistine rulers, recognizing the opportunity, approached Delilah with a substantial offer: 1,100 pieces of silver from each ruler if she could uncover the secret of Samson's strength. Motivated by greed, Delilah agreed. What followed was a relentless campaign of manipulation. Delilah repeatedly asked Samson to reveal the source of his strength, and each time he gave her a false answer. First, he claimed he could be subdued if tied with fresh bowstrings. When that failed, he suggested new ropes and then weaving his hair into a loom. Each attempt ended in failure as Samson broke free with ease. But Delilah's persistence wore Samson down. Day after day she accused him of not loving her, using emotional manipulation to weaken his resolve. Eventually, Samson succumbed to her demands, revealing the truth. His strength lay in his Nazirite vow, symbolized by his uncut hair. By sharing this secret, Samson broke the sacred covenant that set him apart, leaving him vulnerable for the first time in his life. Delilah wasted no time. As Samson slept, she called for a Philistine barber to shave his head. When he awoke, he didn't realize the Lord had departed from him. Believing he still possessed his strength, Samson attempted to fight off his captors but found himself powerless. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes and took him to Gaza in chains. There they forced him to grind grain in a prison, a humiliating task for the once mighty warrior. For Samson, this period of captivity marked the lowest point of his life. The man who had been chosen by God to deliver Israel now found himself blind, broken, and imprisoned. Yet even in this dark chapter, hope remained. Unbeknownst to the Philistines, Samson's hair began to grow back, symbolizing the potential for redemption. While his physical strength was tied to his hair, his true strength had always come from his relationship with God, a relationship that was now being renewed. The Philistines, confident in their victory, decided to celebrate. They gathered in their temple to honor their god, Dagon, believing he had delivered Samson into their hands. The celebration was a grand affair, attended by thousands including Philistine rulers. As part of the festivities, they brought Samson out of the prison to entertain them. Blind and weakened, Samson was mocked and humiliated before the crowd. But Samson, in his final act of faith, turned to God once more. Placed between the two central pillars of the temple, he prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." This prayer reflected a mix of personal pain and a desire to fulfill his divine mission. With renewed strength from God, Samson braced himself against the pillars. With a mighty push, he brought the temple crashing down, killing himself along with thousands of Philistines, including their rulers. This final act not only avenged his suffering but also struck a significant blow to the Philistines, fulfilling his role as Israel's deliverer. Samson's downfall was both tragic and redemptive. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of straying from God's path but also of his enduring mercy. Even in his weakest moments, Samson found strength in God, demonstrating that redemption is always possible, no matter how far we fall. Samson's final moments capture the paradox of his life, a man of unparalleled strength yet deeply flawed, ultimately finding redemption in his greatest act of faith. Blinded and broken in the Philistine prison, Samson was a shadow of the hero he once was. His enemies believed his power was gone, but they underestimated the God who had been with him since birth. As Samson labored, his hair grew back, a sign of God's presence and a symbol of hope. His redemption, however, came not from his hair but from his restored faith. The Philistines organized a grand festival to honor their god, Dagon, celebrating Samson's defeat. Thousands gathered, including their rulers, mocking Samson as he was brought out to entertain them. Weak and humiliated, Samson turned to the one source of strength he had always depended on, God. "Sovereign Lord," he prayed, "remember me. Strengthen me just once more." Placed between two central pillars of the temple, Samson pushed with all his might. The building collapsed, killing thousands of Philistines, including their leaders and himself in the process. In death, Samson fulfilled his divine purpose, striking a decisive blow against Israel's oppressors. Samson's story is a testament to the power of faith and God's mercy. Though flawed and often misguided, Samson's final act shows that redemption is possible for anyone who turns back to God. His sacrifice reminds us that even our weakest moments can lead to the greatest victories when we trust in Him. And now, a message for you. If you've been inspired by Samson's story, consider subscribing to our channel for more engaging and powerful Bible stories like this one. Share this video with friends and family who might need encouragement, and don't forget to leave a like to support our work. Together we can explore more lessons of faith, redemption, and purpose. Thank you for joining us in this journey through the life of Samson. We look forward to sharing more with you soon. Until then, stay blessed and remember, no one is too far from redemption.